Hey guys, we're gonna do another math lesson, and this time we are working on 15-3. So we've talked in general about polygons, we've talked about triangles, so today we're gonna focus on only quadrilaterals. We've been calling all four-sided figures quadrilaterals, but today we're going to be able to describe them even more specifically and classify them by 5 different names. So there's 5 different kinds of quadrilaterals that we'll talk about today, which are parallelogram, trapezoid, rectangle, rhombus, and square. We're going to talk about all of the properties that make up one of these shapes and how to specifically name them, because some of them can be called multiple names, okay? But before we do that, let me go over the answers to your homework from last night. So if you need to pause the video so that you can get your workbooks out, go ahead and do that now, because I'm gonna go over answers. Alrighty, so for reteaching page on 15-2, number 1, that triangle is an isosceles obtuse triangle. Number 2, that is a scalene right triangle. Number 3 is an equilateral acute triangle. For numbers 4, 5, and 6, based on those angles, you should be able to determine that 4, 5, and 6 are all obtuse triangles because they have at least one angle that is over 90 degrees. For practice, number 1 is a scalene triangle and a right triangle. Number 2 is an equilateral acute triangle. 3 is an acute triangle. All of those angles are smaller than 90 degrees. Number 4 is a 90 degree, has a 90 degree angle, so that is a right triangle. Number 5 is an acute triangle, and number 6 is a right triangle. For number 7, it is an isosceles acute triangle. Number 8 is D, 0 sides equal. And for number 9, it is an isosceles triangle because 2 of the sides are the same length. Okay, so if you have any questions, if you're not sure why you got some of them wrong, please make sure you let me know so I can explain it to you. We will be reviewing soon. So these next few lessons that we'll be doing, 15-3, 4, and 5, are all about quadrilaterals. So you'll be having a quiz next week. So on the 1st, May 1st, you'll have a quiz. So in the next few days, we'll be reviewing, and we'll have a Zoom meeting so that we can talk about this information. If you have any questions, you can ask me. So look out for that in the next few days. Alrighty, so let's go back to talking about quadrilaterals. Remember that this topic is super important that you write down the information because it's all basically remembering what makes up these shapes, what makes up these polygons. They have very specific properties, so the only way to really understand this material is remembering the properties for each shape. So one way to do that is writing it down so that you have it and you can study from there. Okay, so make sure you have your notebooks out. If you need to pause to go get them, go ahead and do that now. Okay, so the first thing I have for you is a table, and it kind of gives you a breakdown of the properties of these 5 quadrilaterals. I'm going to talk about each one specifically, but I just wanted to put them all together so you can kind of have a visual of what these properties are. So the first one we're going to talk about is a parallelogram. And a parallelogram is made up of both pair of sides being parallel. We're going to talk about that word in a little bit, but for now, just know that a parallelogram means that both sides, okay, the pairs, are always going to be parallel. The next one is a trapezoid, and a trapezoid means that only one pair of sides is parallel. A rectangle has both pairs of sides parallel and also has 4 right angles. So that means the angles that make up that shape are all 90 degrees. A rhombus has both pairs of sides parallel and has 4 equal sides. So that means that the opposite sides are parallel, but they're all also equal in length. And a square has both pairs of sides parallel, has 4 right angles, so 4 90-degree angles, and 4 equal sides. So now let's talk about the word parallel. So this word is very, very important to help us understand how these shapes are made. Okay, and it also is going to help us determine whether a shape is a parallelogram, whether it's a trapezoid, whether it's a square, because if the sides are parallel, then we know one of the properties of that shape. Okay, so parallel means that two lines are never going to cross. No matter how long, no matter how far out you stretch them, these lines are never going to cross. So for example, these two lines that I have here. If I were to extend these lines even further, okay, if I were to stretch, even this side stretch, they are never going to touch. Okay, they're just going to go out straight. They'll never touch no matter how far we stretch them out. Okay, that means that these lines are parallel. And that's very important for quadrilaterals. So let's talk about a parallelogram. And remember, if I'm going too fast, you can always pause it. You can rewind so that you have all of this information in your notebooks. Okay, so a parallelogram means that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel and the opposite sides are equal in length. So what that means, this side and this side are opposite sides. Okay, so top and bottom, left and right. These are going to be opposite sides. Okay, the top and bottom are parallel. Notice that those lines, even if we extend them out, will never touch. Okay, then also they are equal in length. So let's say this was 9 feet. The bottom also has to be 9 feet. That means they're equal in length. Same thing for the other opposite pair. So left and right pair, these, if we extend them out, are never going to touch with these. So these sides are parallel and they're also equal in length. Maybe this one is 6 feet and this one is also 6 feet. Okay, so opposite sides are parallel and equal, opposite sides are parallel and equal. That means this is a parallelogram. And this is the most basic quadrilateral there is. Okay, so it's just opposite parallel, opposite equal, and it has 4 sides, obviously. The next one we have is a trapezoid. And a trapezoid is made up when only one pair of sides is parallel. So if you notice these two lines here, because they're straight, they're not going to touch ever. These are the pair that are parallel. Because if you see these lines on the sides, if we extend them far out enough, eventually they will touch up here. Okay? So that means that these lines are not parallel. But because we have one pair that's a trapezoid. Okay? And remember, we've seen these shapes in past grades, since maybe even kindergarten, but you have to really look at how the shape is made. So yes, we know we know trapezoids usually look like this. Okay, but we are going to see others that maybe look a little funky, but because of the one pair of sides that are parallel, that makes it a trapezoid. If it has two pairs, it is not a trapezoid. Okay, let's talk about rectangles. So a rectangle is also considered a parallelogram. So if we look back at what a parallelogram is, it means that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel and equal in length. So let's take a look at that in the rectangle. That means both pairs of sides, so top and bottom, are parallel and equal. So these two have the same length, say 14 and 14. They're parallel, they have the same length. These left and right are also equal and parallel. Okay, so they will also be part of the rectangle. But what makes a rectangle special or different than a parallelogram is the fact that it has 4 right angles. Okay, that means that when these points, when these line segments touch, this angle makes 4 90-degree angles. So all of these are going to be 90 degrees. Okay, that's a very specific part about the rectangle. So yes, all rectangles can also be called parallelograms, but they're going to be called rectangles only if they have 4 right angles. Otherwise, if you look at the parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel and equal, but they don't have 4 right angles. Okay, now let's take a look at a rhombus. A rhombus is also a parallelogram because opposite sides, top and bottom, left and right, are parallel and equal. The only difference between a parallelogram and a rhombus is that all the sides are the same length. Okay, so that means that parallelograms don't have to have all equal sides. They just have to have opposite sides be equal. But a rhombus has to have all sides equal in order for it to be a rhombus. So a rhombus is similar to a rectangle. Rhombuses can also be called parallelograms, but what makes them specifically a rhombus, which is the better answer to use, is that they have all sides the same length. Okay? And lastly, let's talk about a square. So a square is a rectangle, which means it's a parallelogram because rectangles are parallelograms. They have opposite sides equal, opposite sides parallel. But what makes it different than a parallelogram is the fact that it's a rectangle means that it has 4 right angles. So a parallelogram doesn't have to have 4 right angles. A rectangle does. So because a square is also a rectangle, it has to have 4 right angles. What makes a square different than a rectangle is that all sides are the same length. So this one's similar to a rhombus too, because a rhombus has to have 4 or all the sides the same length. The only reason why a rhombus can never be a square is because a rhombus does not have 4 right angles. Okay, a square does have to have it. So a square can be called a parallelogram, it can be called a rhombus, it could be called a rectangle, but the best answer for this shape would be a square because it has opposite sides parallel, opposite sides same length, it has 4 right angles, and it has all sides the same length. Okay, so let's practice naming these shapes. Okay, so if we take a look at these shapes, we have to look at what makes up this shape in order for us to classify them correctly. So there's a lot of names we can say, okay, but there's one best answer for each of these shapes. So if we take a look at this first shape here, okay, so let's break it down. Do they have opposite sides parallel? Well, this side is going to be parallel to this side. They're never going to touch. Okay, but if we look at this opposite side on left to right, this line is kind of slanted. So if we keep going up, if we extend that line, it's eventually going to touch this line. So if it only has one pair of sides opposite, the only answer it can be is a trapezoid. Okay, so if you look back in your notes, if we go back to what a trapezoid is, it means that only one pair of sides are parallel. And that's exactly what we have here. Okay, now let's look at this next one. These opposite sides look parallel, top and bottom. Okay, these look parallel side to side, and they're all equal in length. So, well, from first off, we know that it's a parallelogram because opposite sides are equal and parallel. But because you notice that all of them are the same, it's got to be a rhombus. That's the best answer for this shape. Okay, how about this next one? So we have opposite sides parallel, opposite sides are equal in length. We have 4 right angles, but because they're not all equal, the best answer for this is a rectangle. Okay, now take a look at this next one. These sides are parallel, opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are the same, opposite sides are the same, but because they're not all the same, this is going to be a parallelogram. Parallelogram. Okay, and then let's take a look at this last one. So opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are equal, opposite sides are equal. Actually, they're all equal. They have 4 right angles. So that means the best answer for this is a square. Okay, so notice how they can kind of overlap. Remember we said a square can also be a rhombus. It can be a rectangle. It can be a parallelogram. But the best answer would be a square because it fits all of those properties. So that's what I want you to focus on. They might be, well, it could be this, it could be that, but the best answer because it fits all of the qualities would be the square. Okay, so please make sure that you do that when you're looking at the shapes in your homework. So let's take a look at these that don't really have little markings to them. So here we can see that this side is parallel to this side. It's never going to touch. This side is parallel to this side. It's never going to touch. They look to be about the same lengths. So we're going to call this a rhombus. Okay, because these lines are opposite and parallel. We know one pair is going to be parallel, but these are slanted, so they're eventually going to touch down here if we extend them. That means they're not parallel. So since only one pair is parallel, it's a trapezoid. Okay, here, opposite sides are parallel, opposite sides are parallel. This is the same length as this. This is the same length as this, but they're not all the same length, so it's a parallelogram. Okay, then we have opposite sides parallel here, opposite sides parallel here. This side is the same size as this one. This is the same size as this one. And it looks pretty straight, so we know that it also has right angles. So this is going to be a rectangle. Okay, over here, opposite sides are parallel. Opposite sides are parallel. This side looks to be the same length as this side and this side. They actually all look to be the same length. They also have right angles, so this is a square. Okay, so that's how I kind of want you to go through these shapes. So if you can look at them quickly and know right off the bat what they are, great. But if you need to go through the checklist and look at the sides, the opposite sides, maybe how long they are they ever going to touch? Okay, do that so that it can help you look for the best answer to choose. Okay, if you're a little confused, if you need my help, please let me know before you get started on your homework. Please make sure you do practice and reteaching. I also have a Plickers form for you to fill out just so that I know you guys are on the right page. And that's about it. So please let me know if you have any questions. We'll go over answers to this in the next lecture, and we'll go over all of this review together soon. Alrighty? So I'll talk to you soon. Bye.